Today, you are going to watch as a woman descends from jet-setting socialite into a notorious madam, grooming underage girls to fulfill her lover and employer's sexual appetite. Starting from her childhood, we'll follow her life and try to discover when and why she eventually made the choices she did. Christmas Day, 1961. Ghislaine Noel Marion Maxwell was born to Robert Maxwell, a publishing tycoon, and his wife Elizabeth in Maison Lafitte, Yvelines, France. Tragically, 2 days later, her 15-year-old brother was in a car accident, where brain damage left him in a coma until his death in 1967. Devastated, the family neglected Ghislaine until when she was 3 years old, she looked up at her mother and said, "Mama, I exist." From that day on, they doted on their youngest daughter to the point where her mother said that Ghislaine is the only one of her children she claims to be spoiled. However, life didn't become all sunshine and roses for Ghislaine. Her father, Robert, had a notorious temper and was known to both mentally and physically abuse his children, and while she became the favorite, Ghislaine was not spared. Like many abused children, she became devoted to trying to please and appease him, placing him on a pedestal. Throughout her childhood, lavish parties were thrown for celebrities and politicians in the 53-room mansion, Headington Hill Hall, that the Maxwell family called home. Young Ghislaine attended these parties from a young age, learning how to mingle with the rich and famous and form connections that would serve her the rest of her life. In 1973, Robert installed a Wang computer, the price being equivalent to a cool $43,141 today, where he immediately set up Ghislaine to learn how to operate it as well as write code. As forward-thinking as he was with technology, he maintained a heavy hand on Ghislaine, not allowing her to bring boyfriends home or even being seen in public with them while attending Balliol College in Oxford. This didn't prevent her from pursuing her own agenda, using her time to forge her own connections outside of her father's sphere. She never became close with other women, maintaining only a polite facade unless she thought they might be used to reach powerful men. Fellow students described her as calculating and interested in power, which makes her eventual relationship with Epstein unsurprising. Still, during this period, she spent most of her time working closely with her father in a variety of roles, a poster child for entitlement and nepotism. Robert made her the director of Oxford United Football Club under his ownership, and she also worked at the European, a publication that he, you guessed it, also owned. This position rankled Ghislaine because she wanted to be a fashion reporter, and witnesses claimed that she was shocked when her father told her no. Possibly even realized it would be pushing things since that position didn't even exist, and the editor didn't want Ghislaine at all. Robert then tailor-made a company for her which dealt in corporate gifts, but it wasn't profitable. Still, Ghislaine remained her father's favorite, and in 1986, he named his yacht the Lady Ghislaine in her honor. During much of the late 80s, this is where she spent most of her time. Unknown to Ghislaine, her father wasn't exactly above board in his business dealings. At least, it has never been proven that she knew anything, but it would be unsurprising to find out otherwise. With her knowledge or not, on November 5, 1990, Robert sent her to New York with an envelope containing a plot to steal $200 million from Berlitz shareholders. In November of 1991, Ghislaine's life turned upside down. Her father's body was found floating in the water beside the Lady Ghislaine. While his death was ruled as being from natural causes, and the rest of her family accepted this verdict, Ghislaine maintained that he had been murdered. Given his business dealings, this makes her belief fairly probable, especially if she knew more than she revealed. As it was, funds in excess of $400 million were missing and affected 32,000 people, which would at the very least make for a hefty motive. Naturally, the Maxwell name became mud, and her family encouraged Ghislaine to remain in America, at least until things had died down. Taking their advice, she took up permanent residence in New York, where she worked at a real estate office to supplement her annual income of £80,000 left to her in a trust by her father. Unsurprisingly, this wasn't enough to maintain the lavish lifestyle that she was so accustomed to, and Ghislaine began to use her connections and skills to become a socialite on this side of the pond. Some people theorize that her father's passing paved the way for her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, believing that she traded one monster for another. There's a lot of validity in that theory. Raised by a man who is known for his bullying and controlling nature, as well as his abusiveness, it isn't surprising that Ghislaine felt a void after his death. Like many victims of abuse, much of her life and even identity revolved around appeasing her abuser, and it isn't unusual for someone in her position to gravitate towards similar people, creating a cycle. Her initial meeting with Epstein is shrouded in mystery. Some claim that her father actually introduced them, while others say they met at a party after her difficult breakup with Count Gianfranco Cicogna Mazzoni of Sigo Hotels. Even the nature of the relationship remains unclear, although judging from her available pictures and accounts, it at least started as a romantic or sexual relationship. In 1992, she began to hire, fire, and supervise his staff. Like being initiated into a cult, they were each given a 58-page manual and were ordered only to speak when spoken to and never to make eye contact with Epstein. Epstein made good use of her connections, and his name has been linked with high-profile names from entertainment, politics, and even royalty. When most people think of a madam, their mental image is usually that of a hardened, used-up, old-time saloon girl presiding over a flock of younger women. This image couldn't be further from reality. Sophisticated and stylish, Maxwell was adept at luring in young women and gauging what it would take to accept being in sexual situations with Epstein. She took the boiling frog approach. She would act interested in the girls like an older sister. She would shower them with affection and expensive shopping trips, which subconsciously filled them with a sense of gratitude and obligation. She did it so slowly and so naturally that most of them didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. While she continued to perform this service for Epstein throughout the 90s, it didn't stop Ghislaine from having other romantic relationships. Around 2000, she began to date Ted Waite of Gateway fame, and the relationship lasted until 2011. It was probably good that she was connected to him during this period, because things were starting to go south for Epstein. In 2005, he was accused of molesting a 14-year-old girl, and in 2008, he was convicted for soliciting a minor for prostitution. Ghislaine possessed a strong sense of self-preservation and immediately began distancing herself from Epstein and was no longer seen with him publicly. For years, Ghislaine maintained a fairly low profile, with the only occasional photo surfacing of her in the company of some of the select, powerful set that she preferred to associate with. This included owners of some of the world's largest publications, so it shouldn't be a shock to anyone that any negative press was halted in its tracks before it became too big to ignore. In 2015, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, known at the time as Jane Doe 3, sued Ghislaine for forcing her to have sex with Jeffrey Epstein and trafficking other minors into prostitution. Giuffre is probably one of the most well-known victims, mostly because of her connection to Prince Andrew. Giuffre alleges that when she was 17, she was flown to London to have sex with the prince at Epstein's house. This didn't happen just once. She was taken to be used by Andrew several times, both in Manhattan and the Virgin Islands. Ghislaine managed to settle this fairly quietly, at least for a period of time. In 2016, Ghislaine married tech CEO Scott Borgerson, a fact which was, rather bizarrely, kept a secret until 2020. In 2017, Ghislaine's past once again caught up with her in the form of Sarah Ransom, who accused her forced prostitution and claimed that Ghislaine threatened her when she tried to refuse Epstein's sexual demands. The case was settled that year with undisclosed terms. Giuffre popped back up in 2018 to sue Ghislaine once more, this time for defamation of character after being called a liar. The verdict was in her favor, and once again, there seems to be a theme here. There was an undisclosed monetary settlement. Ghislaine tightened up her privacy even more and seems to have avoided all public social events. Becoming a recluse didn't help her much because on April 16, 2019, Maria Farmer accused Ghislaine and Epstein of sexually assaulting her and her 15-year-old sister. Annie Farmer described Ghislaine's methods in detail. Ghislaine would take her shopping and encourage her to pick out expensive items, which Ghislaine would then buy for her. They would go to the movies and other activities normally enjoyed by teenagers, cementing herself a positive force in Annie's life. When Annie was 16, she was invited to what was supposed to be a party for young people at Epstein's New Mexico ranch. On arrival, she was shocked to discover that no one else was there. Sensing she was nervous, Ghislaine offered to give her a massage, and Annie unwisely agreed. She became nervous when Ghislaine began to touch her uncovered breasts, especially when she realized that the door was open enough for Epstein to look inside. Almost casually, Ghislaine informed Annie that it would be a good idea for her to learn how to give a foot massage, as this was something Epstein enjoyed. While Annie was most likely too inexperienced and frightened to fully possess this, it is clear that this was a gateway request to get her used to touching Epstein before he started making more overtly sexual requests. Although she was still uneasy, Annie went to the movies with Epstein and Maxwell, where Epstein proceeded to caress her leg. Again, this got her used to his touch in a setting where she was unlikely to protest, almost ensuring that she would comply more and more as each level of resistance was broken down. Is it any real wonder that victims describe Ghislaine as a master manipulator of human emotion and environment? On July 6, 2019, Epstein was arrested for sex trafficking minors. His trial was highly anticipated, but that came crashing down on August 10th when he somehow managed to commit suicide in his cell. You could practically hear the collective sigh of relief from the elite classes until attention was turned to Ghislaine. Ghislaine all but disappeared, making it virtually impossible to track her down to serve court documents. She was finally arrested on July 2, 2020, and was charged with 6 federal crimes, including enticement of minors, sex trafficking, and perjury. Due to the fact that France would not extradite her and how successful she had previously managed to evade arrest, bail was denied, although it was repeatedly requested that she be allowed to live freely with a friend while being under surveillance. Ghislaine's attorneys regularly protested about the conditions of her confinement, which included being kept awake by a light shown in her eyes every 15 minutes to deter the chances of her committing suicide, and being denied a sleep mask. Because, of course, the lack of sleep mask is a top concern in this situation. Her trial commenced on November 29, 2021, although many people were cynical about the likelihood of there being a fair trial, given the connections Ghislaine had. It didn't help that it was decided that much of the information in the trial would remain hidden, under the claim of being too salacious for public knowledge, and that it would adversely affect some of the people named. This choice angered many people. Why were such notables such as Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, and Prince Andrew allowed to hide behind such a flimsy excuse? Surely the victims were owed the chance for everyone to know who was complicit in their abuse. Ghislaine maintained that she was innocent of all charges and that she only ever provided Epstein with massage therapists who were of legal age. Just as with Prince Andrew's protestations of innocence, the public wasn't buying it. The important question, though, was did the jury? Apparently not, because on December 29, 2021, Ghislaine was convicted by a jury on 5 of her 6 charges, which comes as a sentence up to 65 years, and she is still facing a trial for perjury stemming from her testimony during the 2015 civil suit about Epstein's abuse of underage girls. Ghislaine has already started the appeal process, and things might actually turn in her favor. Mere weeks after the trial, it was discovered that one of the jurors had been a childhood victim of sexual abuse. This begs a thought-provoking question. How did such a person slip past the vetting process on such a high-profile trial? Surely that would have been one of the questions asked. There are some that believe that the juror may have even been planted, since there are certainly enough individuals with the money and connections to arrange such a thing. All in all, it's just a little too convenient, a little too neat for events to play out as they have. Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell may very well get away with not having to serve a meaningful length of prison time. Hundreds of well-known names will probably never even go to trial for the crimes they committed. 36 young girls had their lives irrevocably damaged, and those are just the ones that have been confirmed. Will any of them see justice? Will any of them see the day where they can be confident that their abusers will be exposed and held to account? The very fact that this is even a question should weigh very heavily on everyone. As for Ghislaine Maxwell, it is unlikely that she will ever make a full confession or give more details than the names we already know. Prison time is even more unlikely. At most, we can expect to see her in some form of house arrest, differing very little from her already reclusive lifestyle. Unlike the girls that she abused and sold out, Ghislaine will probably be able to sleep well at night, the memory of her uncomfortable time in jail just playing out in a dream behind her expensive silk sleep mask.